All right, music fans, welcome. Harmless me back again, talking real music in real time for real people just like you, just like me. All right, before we get going here, one of my favorite albums thus far in the year 2022, Guiding Star by Zadra. That's August Zadra. August is the lead guitarist for Dennis DeYoung and his touring band. And some people say he's more like Tommy Shaw than Tommy Shaw himself. Uh, I just think he's a really good creative artist, and this proves it. If you really dig the album oriented music of the 1980s and maybe the 70s and maybe the early 90s, I don't know. This album here has got something for everyone, really well put together. Great songs, great production value, great playing. I mean, this guy, he's really great. I think we did an interview, I don't know, right after this came out, maybe a couple of months after it came out with August, and he's just a good guy. I've known about him for a long time, and we've communicated a little back and forth. So excellent music. Been listening to that lately. Also, this new thing called Crossing Rubicon. I'm going to be talking about that in the future. That's another holy crap Batman moment for 2022. Speaking of great moments, anytime you're going to go see Sammy Hagar and his band, it's going to be a great moment. It's going to be something that you're going to be talking about. Sammy Hagar at his age, still bringing it. His new music is about to drop fairly soon. And there's talk all the time about this Van Halen tribute and will it ever happen? Here's the way I see it right now. Go see Sammy Hagar in this circle, and you'll get a whole bunch of Van Halen. And Sammy Hagar even confirms that. He says in a recent article in the News Herald that he feels an obligation or a sense of responsibility to perform these songs. And of course, when you've got Michael Anthony in the band, it makes it so much better because you got two guys who are just in Van Halen at one point for quite some time. Michael Anthony being a founding member of Van Halen, and kind of like the odd man out over the years. I kind of feel bad for Michael because for whatever reason, he and Ed weren't getting along, whether that was loyalty that he displayed when it came to hanging out with Sammy and just sticking with Sammy. And then Wolfgang comes along and he becomes the bass player. And I don't know. None of that to me made a lot of sense, but I understand there was a lot of bad blood, hard feelings. Sammy Hagar said some real harsh stuff, but here's the deal. David Lee Roth, I think he's out. I think he's out of the picture. This Van Halen tribute thing, I don't think it's going to happen. You know, it should have happened already, which is weird, right? And then you had Dave come out and say that, Ed was culturally illiterate, and I did a video on that. I don't think anybody really covered that. It was just like a little thing on the Van Halen news desk or whatever, and there were a couple of articles, but I think people were a bit surprised that Dave had said that, but they didn't really cover it the way they should have. And I think the comment showed that there was a rift. After Ed passed away, I found it kind of weird that all Sammy could say is, hey, it's a long, strange trip. And yeah, he also released a song, I don't know, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe now, which is supposed to be about the early days of Van Halen. It's not necessarily about Ed. People kept saying it's a tribute to Ed, and I'm like, how is it a tribute to Ed? It's basically Dave being nostalgic. That's what Dave is really good at. And to me, all of this kind of misses the mark. That's why it's great that Sammy's out there and he's performing Van Halen songs, and they're even doing Roth era songs with Michael Anthony doing lead vocals. So if I want to go, here's some Van Halen, I'm going to go and check out Sammy Hagar and the Circle. Not to mention that Vic Johnson, the guitarist, is insane. He's insane. Every time I see that guy play, I'm like, holy crap, Batman and Robin, and why doesn't this guy get more ink? Because he is really a spectacular player. Kind of came out of nowhere in the late 90s, was with a band called the Bus Boys, and he was also influenced heavily by none other than James Marshall Hendrix, right? So, I don't know. I guess the guy is a pretty good player, and you should check him out. And then you've got, old Jason Bonham back there playing drums. So if I'm into rock music and it's the year 2022, probably one of the better tickets you can buy is to go see Sammy Hagar. Plus, he's got new material coming out. He says it's a little on the dark side because it's talking a lot about some of the stuff that's been going on for the past 2+ years. It's funny that more artists weren't creative during that time period, kind of critiquing what the government was doing, what the news media was doing, what politicians specifically were doing. It's really weird. Like, they're just going to ignore that all happened now. Oh, nothing to see here, even though we yelled at you guys for 2+ years. And they're still yelling in some cases. And they're still doing articles about protocols and this and that. And you're like, give it up. I mean, talk about, I don't know, information fatigue. And it's the kind of stuff that's not helping. Didn't help then. It's not helping now. So good for Sammy for actually writing. He says, I felt like I really nailed how I was feeling at that moment when I started writing these songs. He says, I don't mind being serious. It's one of the criticisms that David Lee Roth had, was that, the party ended when Sammy took over, because Sammy wasn't about the party and Dave was, and Dave was the ringmaster and Sammy was too serious. And I don't know, after a while, some of the Roth stuff doesn't age as well because it is a little bit goofy. Although I'm not against goofy, I'm not against, cheesy or whatever. But Sammy Hagar, I think, was always kind of a serious and straight ahead songwriter. And some people might say a bit simplistic. I don't know. Dave wasn't that complicated. I mean, these guys were writing rock songs that you could crank up in the car. So this wasn't like REM, where you just, what did he just say? Or what did that mean? This was Van Halen, and people had expectations. And in certain ways, you weren't expecting that you're going to get, this in-depth, really. I mean, Right Now is probably one of the better songs that Van Halen has ever written, right, with Sammy. And it's a little bit provocative, a little bit interesting. Some people think it's a little scatterbrained, but I don't know. I think it's a great song, and it showcased both Sam and the late, great Eddie Van Halen, who was really getting into keyboards, and people were getting on him for being the keyboard whiz all of a sudden, but he mastered another instrument, and people should have celebrated that. Anyway, Sammy says that even if they play a deep cut like Amsterdam, right, from 1995, people are singing along like the tune is on the radio all the time. Hey, people were still holding on in 1995. That was one of the few bands, right, at the time that was still doing mostly melodic rock, although they had kind of shifted a little bit on most of the material, right, to a more dark sort of, we're going to try to fit in with the grunge scene attitude. And if you go back and listen, you're like, okay, I want to go back to OU812, or for unlawful carnal knowledge. We all know what that spells, right? That was the big crazy thing at the time. Hey, do you know what the initials say? It's like, yup. And duh, of course it was intentional. Anyway, Sammy goes on to say, when people love that music that much, and we're the guys who did it, and we're still around, then yeah, we have that responsibility to play it for them. Crazy Times, the Circle's second album of original music, is set for release on September 30th. Their Crazy Times tour, also starring the amazing George Thorogood, who should be the halftime show at the Super Bowl. I love that. Oh man, just crank up some Bad to the Bone. The tour itself resumes on the 23rd and then runs until September 10th. And yes, I'm sure tickets aren't cheap, but if you're, I mean, those two bands, oh, come on, man. I'd go see those two bands ahead of the stadium tour. I would. I mean, I've seen Def Leppard. I love Def Leppard. So that's off my list. And I've seen Sammy Hagar with Chickenfoot, but I've never seen him as a solo artist or with Van Halen. George Thorogood would just blow my mind. So those guys together, that's one heck of a tour. So in any event, that's my video, and I'm just going to stick to that. And here's August Zadra one more time. Just Zadra, you know, smart marketing. You got a cool last name. It looks cool when you write it out like this. You've got a logo, and it's called Guiding Star. Guiding Star. Go check it out. It's good stuff. All right, I'm done. I'll be back. See you then.